guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about Shanda Vander Ark. If you haven't heard of this case, then keep watching because this is a good one to listen to. On July 6, 2022 at 6:37 a.m., the Northern Shores Police Department responded to an emergency call about a suspicious death at a home in Michigan. The police were told that there was an unresponsive 15-year-old boy. Once the police arrived on the scene, they discovered the body of a teenage male, and he was confirmed dead. The police said the victim appeared to be extremely malnourished and there was evidence of abuse. This victim's name was Timothy Ferguson. The police began to make their rounds inside the home, and as they're walking around searching through the home, they saw more and more concerning things going on within the home. The refrigerator had locks on it, there were cameras all over the house, and there were alarms. Also, when they saw Timothy, he was wearing clothes that were way too big for him. He had an adult diaper on, and he also looked emaciated. From what they were observing, this looked like a house of horrors, and they needed to learn what happened here because who lives like this and what has been going on? After asking questions, the police learned Timothy had autism. From what I know, Timothy was diagnosed with autism with speech, motor impairment, and sensory processing. However, his mother, Shanda, said he had high-functioning autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and several other mental ailments. Also in the home was Shanda's son, Paul. Paul was confirming everything Shanda was saying and was trying to explain why their house was the way it was, why it was in this condition.
He's been wearing really loose clothes the last couple of weeks.
He's really skinny.
He's really skinny, and I didn't notice till this morning because he wouldn't, I asked him if he's okay, and he would not answer me. He's 15. He's been...
He has autism?
Yeah.
Like a high functioning?
Yeah. I had no clue how bad it was. Oh my God. Like I said, he did this back in, my husband's stroke was January 3rd. Mm-hmm. So he did this back in, I don't know, second week of January for almost 3 weeks. And then he ate something last night. I can't remember what it was now, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Oh.
Now you said the last time you saw him was 5:30 this morning?
Yeah.
Did he say anything?
He had fallen out of bed.
At 5:30?
Yeah.
You sure it wasn't earlier?
I mean, it's possible. I thought it was 5:30, but I wasn't super awake. I heard a thump, and I came down, and he's kind of laying on his side, kind of like, what the heck? And I reached out, and I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry. Oh my God. Yeah. And I reached out and he pulled himself up, and I asked him if he's okay, and I just asked if he hit his head. He said, no, I think I hit my knees on my chest. I think he couldn't tell me how he fell. Oh my God. No, I don't know what to do. Oh my God. He said it was okay.
The police wanted to get more information and a clear understanding of everything that was going on, so they took them down to the police station. Shanda is a 44-year-old mother of 5. She is also a law clerk at the Newaygo County Circuit Court. She is also a law school graduate and passed her bar on their first try. Do you guys know how many lawyers don't pass the bar on the first try? That's impressive. And she graduated with honors. She was very, very smart. However, she did not obtain her license to practice because before she could acquire it, her husband suffered from a stroke. Shanda is the mother to her 23-year-old son, Nolan, her 21-year-old son, Paul, and her 19-year-old daughter, Millie, and 15-year-old son, Timothy, and 8-year-old son, who they are calling G for privacy reasons. Police learn even though she is a mother of 5 children, she only had custody of her youngest child, G. In 2009, Shanda was living in Oklahoma, and Child Protective Services did do an investigation into Shanda's parenting until 2012. And that's when they recommended that she terminate her parental rights. I heard some things about why CPS was involved, but I haven't verified it, so I don't want to say misinformation in this video. But from what I heard, I just know that it really wasn't good. Well, clearly it's not good because, they're involved, but I mean, it just really wasn't good. Shanda had agreed to give up custody in order to not completely get rid of her parental rights. So she said, I'll give up my rights for right now and voluntarily leave the family house to make sure that I can have them back eventually. The father of the children, Eric Ferguson, was granted full custody and she was ordered to pay child support. In 2020, Paul turned 18 and his dad told him he should live on his own because he's like, you're an adult now, so you have to get out of my house. Instead of living on his own, Paul decided to find his birth mother's phone number. Now, his birth mother is Shanda. So he found her number and he called her up and he was like, hey, can I live with you? And she said, oh, son, sure. Even though we haven't spoken God knows how long and you have to look up my number because we're not in constant communication, sure, come move in with me because I'm the best mother. After seeing different videos of Paul, I believe he shows signs of autism as well as his brother Timothy. And he does seem to be a little bit immature for his age because at that time, I think he was 19. So the way he was just sitting in the interrogation room and the way he was just behaving, it just seemed like he was just a little bit less mature or immature than his age. Paul also had sensory processing, and during this time he was working at Applebee's. He moved to his mother's house, and a year later Timothy came to Shanda's home as well. Shanda said that Timothy's father told her that he could not handle Timothy anymore and he needed help. So he asked her if Timothy could live with her. Let me remind you that Shanda gave up her rights and she is not supposed to have custody of Timothy at all. Shanda said that she didn't have any of Timothy's personal documents, so she wasn't able to register him for school. She wasn't able to bring him to the doctors or get medication for him because remember, he does have illnesses or ailments, so she wasn't able to get anything for him. Because of this, she homeschooled him and came up with her own ways to deal with his challenges. Living in the home was Shanda, Paul, Timothy, G, and Adam. Adam is her husband. Adam was wheelchair bound and had recently suffered from a stroke. After his stroke, he moved out of the family home and into his parents' house in West Olive. He did this because in their house, they had 2 stories and he wasn't able to go from floor to floor, so he just thought it'd be easier to live with his parents in their home. Shanda said after Adam left the family home, Timothy went on a hunger strike. Yes. He was so upset that Adam left the home that he said, you know what, Mom? I'm not going to eat anymore. Shanda was already believing Timothy's disabilities was a fake, and now he's refusing to eat. So she convinced her other son, Paul, that Timothy was being deceitful and causing unnecessary issues within the home. Of course, the police had a lot of questions. They asked about the shackles, the locks on the refrigerator, just the state of their home in general, because why does it look like this? Shanda said that Paul had the shackles because he was making a TikTok video. She would say that she locked up the family's fridge and freezer and pantry because Timothy would sneak frozen food and eat uncooked meat and raw meat. She said she was concerned about Timothy's health, even telling her story. She said, I just purchased a 2-pound bag of chicken nuggets, frozen nuggets, and she put it in the freezer. She said, I guess Timothy got around the motion detectors. He said, I ate them. I said, did you cook them? No. He said he ate the whole 2-pound bag frozen. I want you guys to remember that statement. She said he was on a hunger strike. Shanda said the only thing that Timothy loved was hot sauce, so she would feed him hot sauce soaked bread, since that's the only thing that Timothy wanted to eat, because remember, he was on a hunger strike. She also said Timothy would intentionally keep everyone in the house awake. He would set the motion detectors off. He would make noise. She said he would tamper with the appliances and even disorganize the house. But she said the cameras weren't just for Timothy. They were also for G as well. She was trying to protect the both of them. Shanda said that she wasn't intentionally trying to hurt Timothy. She was handling his challenging behavior the best way she knew how.
Okay, that leads to the next question I have for you. You had monitors and cameras in your home. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the impression from the testimony I heard is that it was for the sole purpose of ensuring that Timothy could not get to food. Is that accurate?
No.
Why did you have all those monitors and cameras in your home?
When Timothy came to live with us, his stepmother informed me that they'd had motion sensors. They weren't as tech savvy as I was. I worked in tech before law school. I worked in tech support for several years. But they had motion sensors and she told me that she didn't sleep at night. She only slept when he was at school because he was into everything. And so because my younger child, he used to, when he was about 2, he would take all his clothes off. So we started putting a camera in his room. And then once we moved to the Marshall Road location, it was bi-level. My husband was born with a disability. My husband was wheelchair bound. So we had an extra wheelchair that we kept on the upper level. That's where the master bedroom was. But that way, if little man, if G was down in his bedroom, my husband could talk to him through the camera and have him come up. It was much easier. My husband could crawl down the steps before the stroke, but we didn't want him to have to crawl up and down those steps.
Okay. And again, let's go back to the issue of food. Was food the only reason why you felt you had to monitor Timothy, or were there other issues?
There were plenty of issues, sir.
So we've heard some testimony as to Timothy's special needs. What were his special needs?
He was on the autism spectrum, but he was completely verbal, and he was grade level in school. He was not behind in school at all. He was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He was diagnosed as bipolar and sensory processing disorder. I heard Paul mention physical disability. He didn't have any. Now, Timothy, when he first got there, said he had a physical disability, and I asked his stepmom about it to make sure, and she said no, he was not coordinated at all.
All right. And he liked to take, well, you tell me, did he like to take things apart?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Can you give some examples?
He took batteries apart. He took toys apart, my youngest son's toys. If he could get a hold of anything from Paul's room, he would take, like, mostly it was Legos. Paul still had Legos. He, at one point, messed with our water heater.
What do you mean?
He actually turned the gas off to the water heater. He knocked out the pilot light and then turned the gas off as well at different points.
Okay.
Because of the state of their home, Timothy's appearance, and his death, the police told Shanda and Paul that they needed to come down to the police station to answer some questions. While they were there, they were eventually arrested. Shanda was charged with first-degree murder and child abuse for the death of Timothy. Paul was also charged with first-degree abuse. During Paul's interrogation, he completely defended his mother and believed that they did not do anything wrong. It appeared Paul was really manipulated by his mother, and he seemed to also have autism, if you ask me. I feel like he was on the spectrum. I think he just wanted to have his mother's love, and he would just do anything for her. In the interrogation video, you can see him defending her, saying his mother really isn't that bad. She's a good person. She loved Timothy, and she wanted the best for him.
When you say we, you're talking about your mother?
Yes, she loved him. We wanted what's best.
Yeah.
The thing is, he was stuck in the past.
Okay. So you stopped the food restriction. When did that kind of happen? Like, ballpark that for me.
2 weeks, approximately. We were hoping that we could get enough where he would be safe, and then we could continue to add it back to where we wouldn't have to worry, and we could.
What were the restrictions?
We made sure that it was still something that gave him enough calories and everything. It was rice or bread, and like I said last week, he got pizza.
Okay. What were they in place for, like, in the first place?
Sneaking food over and over and over.
Okay.
We've tried everything. We were nice. We tried different consequences. My stepmother and father agreed on this, that he could be institutionalized.
Right.
And when he got back, the first couple of weeks were good. He didn't misbehave, but then after that, it just reverted back to what he was doing before.
Okay.
The destructiveness and everything.
Let's explain that. Like, the destruction.
It was very dangerous. He would pull the outlet covers off. He would screw into light fixtures. It was
Okay.
Our house in Edmond was his room. He pulled the studs out of the wall, rip off the paint, and it was, yeah.
Were you able to have a conversation with him like you and I are having, like a back and forth conversation, or he wasn't able to talk like that?
He could talk, but the thing is that it would mostly be hard to understand.
Okay.
Because of the speech imparation, I think so. I don't know what that word is.
Speech impediment?
Yeah, there we go. The loft bed, if you've noticed,
Yeah.
just screws and stuff, that was his doing.
Okay.
And we couldn't get it safely back.
So there's this restriction on food. He talked about bread. For how long was he just eating just bread?
A week or two.
What was he kind of eating before that?
We do ramen, sandwiches. I mean, the whole sneaking. I don't.
Because he was sneaking food?
A lot, yeah. We over and over and over. There'd literally be times where I would be sitting on the couch playing,
Yeah.
and then I'd look up and he's there grabbing something.
Yeah. And so, whose idea was it for him to just eat bread? Is that your idea?
No,
Whose idea was that?
my mother's.
Now, I'm not saying that you should feel bad for Paul, and I'm not saying that he's not wrong. I just want you to remember the circumstances that are going on here. Shanda and Paul remained in custody until their trial date. Eventually, Paul would plead guilty to child abuse and would make a deal to cooperate with the prosecution to hopefully get a lesser sentence. Shanda went on trial, and during her trial, we learned exactly what happened to Timothy. Shanda and Paul believed that Timothy was faking his symptoms. So, to punish Timothy for faking his symptoms, Shanda and Paul would withhold food for long periods of time. Timothy did not have any free access to the food in the house. They only fed him hot sauce soaked bread. Remember we talked about that earlier? Yeah, that's the only thing he was getting. They poured hot sauce directly down his throat, forced him to take long ice baths, and deprived him of sleep. They would also make him do wall sits. I don't know if you guys know what wall sits are, but I think that's when you put your arms out and you're sitting against the wall and it's like a fake chair underneath you, but it's really not there, so your thighs are burning. I feel like that's what they made him do. And they also made him run up and down the stairs outside in the rain, cold, snow. And while he was doing this, he didn't have any pants on. He would also constantly be handcuffed. As if that's not enough, he would also have to earn his clothes back with different tasks. So if he did something right, oh, here you go, you can have a shirt today. Oh, here you go, you can have some socks today. Oh, here you go, you can have some pants today. That's basically what happened. Text messages between Paul and Shanda were read out loud in court, and they would discuss different ways to torture Timothy. Also, like I said before, Timothy had autism, so loud noises, disturbances could trouble Timothy. I mean, he's very sensitive to sound, so anything like that would clearly bother him. Also, Timothy did have surgery to his ears. I'm not really sure why that was or what it was for, but I just want you guys to know that he did have surgery. By Shanda having constant alerts going off from her cameras, that could really disturb Timothy as well, because the constant dinging and loud noises with the motion here, oh, I have an alarm on me, I move here, it's dinging, everything is just going off in the home. He must have been going nuts, going crazy with all these noises around him. Shanda would find anything to make Timothy uncomfortable. The more uncomfortable he was, the happier she was. A month before Timothy died, Shanda was texting Paul asking him how come Timothy wasn't being watched closely. She had found candy wrappers and saw him brushing his teeth, which meant he probably ate something. Can you believe that? Why aren't you watching him closely enough? Oh, he's brushing his teeth, so that means he must have ate something? He's supposed to be eating every day. He's supposed to be brushing his teeth every day. What is going on? Paul said he was watching him closely and he made sure he didn't have the opportunity to steal anything. She was also upset that she found out Timothy ate a brownie. Yes, Timothy ate a brownie. It's probably the only piece of food that he could get to. I'm sorry, but if Timothy is on a hunger strike, wouldn't you want him to eat something? Wouldn't you be happy that he ate that brownie? Make it make sense. 9 days before Timothy passed away, it's around 3 o'clock in the morning, Shanda says that Timothy is not allowed to be sleeping, and if he falls asleep, he will get another ice bath. She kept bags of ice ready in the freezer for when she wanted to use it on Timothy for the crime of sleeping. Yes, the crime of sleeping. They restrained him with shackles and zip ties and deprived him of sleep. These were regular punishments that he would have often. Shanda covered her house with motion sensors, alarms, and live feed cameras. When I say covered, I mean covered. There were cameras everywhere. There were cameras in every single room, and she would watch Timothy from wherever she was. If she was at work, if she was at the grocery store, if she was at her son's baseball game, her eyes were glued to that phone watching her cameras. And you know what? There was also a camera in the bathroom. Whose bathroom? Timothy's bathroom. There was a camera there to watch him when he used the bathroom. Even people around her would testify that they saw her constantly checking in on her home. She wanted to know what Timothy was doing at each exact moment. And of course, there were cameras and motion sensors in Timothy's room too. I mean, if they're all around the house, of course they're going to be in his room. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention this yet, but Timothy's room, it wasn't a regular bedroom. Of course not. It was a tiny little closet. A tiny little closet under the basement stairs. That was his bedroom. At one point, Paul became worried about how Timothy looked. He reached out to his mother and said this.
Let's go ahead and read the exchange there, starting with the message that Paul sent to you with the photograph.
Timothy tried to sneak food. I yelled at him, and then he became momentarily unresponsive, and then I saw this. He's bone thin, Mama. I think we need to actually feed him.
Okay. And what's your response to that?
I said, Kay, give him bread, please. And then I said, I hear you, give PB sandwiches and water. You want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, the unresponsiveness is probably fake, but I see what you mean.
Okay. And go ahead and the next page.
Also, it's no wonder he's hardly capable of standing.
Then that's the one with photographs of his legs, right?
Yeah, and then I said, I'm in court.
There were also text messages showing that they wanted to hide what they were doing to Timothy from G. Shanda did not want G aware of Timothy's torture. Now remember, G is her younger son, the 8-year-old that's living in the house with them. She did not want him aware of anything that was going on with Timothy. And I think that maybe it's because he had contacts to the outside world and he's a little kid, so she couldn't really control him. I don't know. I don't really know why she didn't want him to know, or I don't know if she didn't want him to know because she didn't want him to look at her in that way, but they were hiding it from him. This is probably obvious, but she was hiding Timothy from everyone else as well. So no one had seen Timothy. They did not know what he looked like. He was not seen outside of the house, and she did not let anyone inside of the house, claiming that her house was a mess, so she didn't want anyone to come inside. G's grandmother would come and pick him up to take him on visits or wherever, but every time she came, Shanda would not let her inside of the house.
Kept him locked up in the basement of that home with motion sensors and alarms to make sure he didn't even go upstairs, let alone anywhere else. But not to even go upstairs. Alarms on his body to go off. He didn't like the noise. Motion sensors on the stairs if he tried to go upstairs. Alarms on his small room, closet, door if he tried to get out. Motion sensors if he put his arm down during a punishment. Cameras watching every moment. What did he do? What is it that he was doing? Apparently so desperate for food that he ate frozen chicken nuggets and uncooked hamburger. Explain this to the jury so they can understand, so they can make sense of why it was that you chose to do these things to him. He was sneaky and deceitful. He'd sneak things when he wasn't supposed to. He was deceitful. He would lie about things. And you heard over and over again in the text messages. He's lying about that. He's not going to get away with it. This is all fake. All of those things. So ask yourself this question. Who do we know was sneaky and deceitful here? The defendant. She finally decides to call 911. But she better get her story straight before we call 911. So what's the last thing she says before she calls 911 to Paul? We'll have to tell him he's been on a hunger strike. Where's your belt? Put your belt on him. I want to make it look like he's been this way.
The night before Timothy died, Timothy was put into a freezing ice bath. While he was sitting there, Shanda told Paul through a text message Tell him if he actually sits up by himself and stays sitting up, he'll get some pizza rolls. Don't tell him it's only 2, and I'm okay if they are frozen rather than cooked. Remember, he is sitting in an ice bath in the bathtub, and she said if he actually sits up. Are you kidding me? If he actually sits up, he's been tortured and he's in an ice bath. You think 2 pizza rolls is just gonna make him sit up? No, he's probably suffering. He is literally dying and struggling to stay alive. Timothy was kept in this ice bath for 9 hours. Afterwards, on video in Timothy's room, you can see Shanda spreading out a tarp on the ground, making it as a makeshift bed. After that, she drags Timothy by his arms into the closet. The closet is his bedroom. She drags him into there. While this is going on, Timothy's eyes were open and you could hear him moaning, but he appeared to be unresponsive. The lieutenant said Timothy was very thin, his bones were protruding, and he wore an adult diaper. In particular, he wasn't wearing any pants, so you could see his hip bones, his knee joints, very prominently displayed as she positioned him in front of the camera. Shanda was telling Timothy he was pathetic and he owes her the biggest apology in the world. In the video, you can see Timothy taking short, shallow breaths through his mouth. Then his mother clamps his mouth shut and tells him he doesn't need to breathe like that. And she holds his mouth shut for a period of time. Then she says, "See, you didn't need to breathe through your mouth like that. You're being a dummy." Towards the end of the video, you can see Timothy's chest rising, lowering very slightly, small little movements, and then there's a point in time where you can't see that anymore, and his body just relaxes. They believe this is when Timothy was no longer alive. Shanda and Paul discovered Timothy was unresponsive and tried to wake him up. They waited 18 minutes before calling 911. During this time, Timothy was stiff, his eyes were fixed open, and he wasn't breathing. After discovering her son dead, Shanda said, "I guess I'm going to be late to work."
The last thing she did to her son was to drag him into a small room, throw him down on the ground like he was a piece of meat on a tarp in the room where she says he wanted to be. That was his comfort. Positions him in front of the camera so she can see. Calls him stupid. Then when he has the indignity to roll over, no, that's not good enough, she comes back. Positions him again in front of the camera. Makes the dog lick his face to get a reaction from him. Holds his mouth closed and said, "See, dummy, you don't need to open your mouth to breathe." Imagine those being the last words you said to your child. So that's what it was. That's the last thing anybody said to Timothy. You don't need to open your mouth to breathe, dummy.
Timothy's cause of death was a combination of malnourishment and hypothermia. He was 5 feet and 9 inches tall, but only weighed 69 pounds. His bones were protruding from his skin. Contusions and sores were scattered around his body. There were dark spots on his internal organs, which is a result of hypothermia. It should be noted that it was said that he resembled a Holocaust victim. His autopsy results showed he was dehydrated and extremely emaciated due to malnourishment and starvation. His ribs were nearly visible through his skin, and his death was ruled a homicide. I don't know if you guys can tell, but that clearly made me upset and uncomfortable talking about that part because that was very graphic. But I wanted you guys to get the picture of what happened to Timothy, what he went through, and just, he didn't deserve that. Paul testified on the behalf of the prosecution in his mother's trial. His testimony was completely different from his interrogation video. In the interrogation video, Paul resembles someone who is younger than him, kind of childlike.
I said, he goes, "Why? Did she tell you why? Does it look bad for you guys?"
It's not just that. We loved him.
Can I ask you this, like, straight up? You keep saying love, love. Do you feel like this was love? That he's dead now because he couldn't eat food? Does that feel like love to you?
No.
He's dead because he couldn't eat.
No.
And I don't know anybody that thinks that's love. What I think's happening is your mom's convinced you that she's this perfect person, and she's asking you to do all these things that are literally killing your brother.
I know she's not perfect.
How's that love? How is love? How is love ice baths? How is love? How is love handcuffing? And how is love restricting movement? And how is love hot sauce in the mouth and only eating bread? What if you only got to eat bread? How would you feel? What if you only got to eat bread with hot sauce? Would you eat?
No.
You're pretty skinny already. It wouldn't take you long.
This is my natural weight. I have an overactive metabolism.
But it wouldn't take you long to be very much skin and bones if all you got to eat was bread and hot sauce, because how could you eat it? And how could you feel good about eating it? Was he throwing up stuff that he was eating?
Forcefully, he would force himself to get it back up.
When? Like recently, in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, he would force himself, honestly.
You ever think it's because maybe it was painful? It's hot sauce. It's not like that just goes away. Did you ever complain about pain, stomach pain, pain from using the bathroom?
Not that I know of, no. I do know that my mother, she's not perfect, but she's not a bad person.
Do you know, can I ask you this? Do you know of any good people who starve their child to death? Tell me of one that you know. Tell me of one that you know. How is that a loving person? How is that a loving mother? You know what that sounds like to me? And honestly, the worst mother I've ever met in my entire life. That's what it sounds like to me.
I know, but she's not.
Maybe she wasn't to you. Maybe she was a good mother to you. And maybe she wasn't to Gabriel. It sounds like she's a very good mother to Gabriel. But to one of the three children, she didn't care. You can say it if you want. She starved him to death because he wouldn't stop taking food. Well, maybe he's taking food because he wants to live. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes.
Maybe he's stealing food so that he can survive. He's dead because he didn't get food.
How knows that?
Well, that's not anybody's fault but your mother's. How long did this go on for?
I don't know.
You feel good at all about any of this stuff?
No, of course not.
You can't, right?
I can't even live with myself.
But how do you feel about over and over and over again defending your mother about how good she is? Do you feel like that's the truth anymore? Because I'm quite disgusted by her. I'm disgusted by her.
She never wanted this.
Then how smart is your mom?
She's incredibly intelligent. Magna cum laude.
Right. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought, how can a woman that's this smart, this intelligent, graduate from law school, how could she not know what's happening? How could she think this is fake? How does she not know she's starving him? How does she not see that he's wasting away? And you here, you're telling me that you've got some mental health issues, but you graduated from high school, and it's very obvious to you that he's got malnutrition, right? It's very obvious to you. But your mom here's not seeing that, and she's a law school graduate, and she's very smart. Do you see what I'm looking at here? Yes. She's a liar. She's lied to you about so much stuff. At some point, you need to stand up for yourself and realize she's the manipulator, she's the liar, she put you in this spot, she did this to your brother, using you. Do you not see that? That she used you to do this to your brother. Your mother used you. She's so smart. She's smarter than any of us here. She's smarter than me. She's smarter than any detective here. She's smarter than our chief of police here. She's smarter than all of us. And we're supposed to believe she didn't know what was happening? No. She didn't want him around anymore because he was too much of a problem. You know that's the truth. You can look back at it and see that, can't you? She didn't want him around anymore because he was too much work. That's the truth. And the second you start to believe that and understand that, then I think that's the time you can move forward in this case. Until you believe that, until you understand that, you're never moving forward from this. This isn't an accident. This didn't just happen. Your mom knew exactly what was happening to him, that he was wasting away. You saw it, didn't you? You saw it happening right in front of you.
At the trial, it looks like he finally understood the heinous things that he did. He said he thinks he might have Stockholm Syndrome and said, I desire to find a role model that, due to my own low self-esteem, I would do anything to make them proud of me. That's not an excuse, I know, but I feel like I'm glad I was at least able to realize it, so I could correct it. He said Timothy was truly not on a hunger strike. It was something his mother made up to hide what was really happening. He said his mother made him do everything he had ever done to Timothy, and they have been torturing him for months. I mean, I think we could put this together, figuring out that, yeah, clearly you guys were torturing him. Clearly. Paul said he was surprised, shocked, and horrified when he realized his brother died. I'm glad he took responsibility for his actions, but he should have realized a long time ago that he was doing horrific things to his brother, to his own brother. Paul could have saved Timothy's life, but I guess he didn't realize in the moment. The defense attorney asked Paul if he loved his brother, and this is what he had to say.
Is there, as you sit there right now, do you love Timothy?
I suppose I didn't love him enough.
No,
It's
that's
why
not
I'm trying to bring justice for him.
Just a moment. I
But can I say that I loved him during the time before his death?
Yes. Did you love him before his death?
With all the ways I acted, I cannot.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Let me ask you this. When did you start feeling this way? While he was alive or after you found out that the way he was being treated killed him?
After?
So while the time he was alive, did you think you were killing him?
No.
You told Detective Peiske that we didn't want this. We loved him so much.
That was what I thought, but it's not true.
It is clear that both of them blamed each other for their actions. They, at first, did not want to take responsibility, and then at the trial, they still didn't want to take responsibility. I mean, Paul took some responsibility, but not full accountability for what he did. Paul would say that Shanda told him to do it, and Shanda would say that Paul suggested ideas. Shanda said because she worked during the day, she had to trust Paul to watch over Timothy and to dole out the punishments. So when she was at work, she was texting Paul like, Paul, I want you to do this to Timothy. Timothy's trying to eat food. He's trying to survive. So I want you to give him an ice bath, and I want you to not give him any food, and let's torture him because he has autism. That's what she was texting him. No, I'm joking. She wasn't texting that, but you get what I'm saying.
Finger at Paul. Paul was pointing the finger at Shanda, and he made me do it. Like, who did it? He did it. Like, it wasn't me. No, it was me. No. It was him. It was him. Pointing the finger at our own son. We read the text messages. We saw them. We saw and heard how this whole thing was playing out. But that's who she is and what she is. And no one expected her to accept responsibility for what happened.
During the trial, text messages were read between Shanda and Paul, and Shanda had a panic attack, so the jury had to be excused.
KK.
Excuse me, you want to try? Yeah. May I approach?
About 5, maybe 10 minutes. So I'll have you retired to the jury room. Please rise. All right, may be seated. Just for purposes of the record, Mr. Roberts and Mr. Johnson had a sidebar with the court indicating Mr. Johnson indicated that his client was suffering some distress, specifically a panic attack, and he asked for 5 minutes. I think that's reasonable. So at this point in time, court is going to take a brief recess. Mr. Johnson, just please let the bailiff know when your client is well enough to proceed.
I'm just going to let you guys know right now that this is a load of shit. She had a panic attack once the text messages were read. Did you have a panic attack when you were texting it? No, you probably were texting it with a smile on your face. During the trial, Shanda claimed to have ADHD and PTSD, which causes her to have many blackouts and remembering things. So throughout the trial, she would constantly say, I don't remember doing that, or I don't remember saying that. I suffer from PTSD from my husband's stroke. In addition, she also said she had hypoglycemia. I did see something saying during Shanda's childhood she was tortured the same way she did Timothy. So, that does happen where if the child is abused, they end up becoming an abuser. After testifying for several hours, she began hyperventilating and showing signs of a mental breakdown. Her defense attorney, Fred Johnson, stood beside her with his hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. Prosecutors handed Shanda a picture of Timothy's frail body, and this is what happened.
You testified that you gave Timothy a warm bath the night before he passed away, that last night, July 5th. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
That was the first time you've told anybody connected to this case that you'd done that, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You never told the police officers you did that, did you?
No, sir.
I imagine a warm bath it's just what it sounds like, right? You got him, you took him to the bath, you drew a warm bath for him, and you put him in the bathtub, right?
Yes, sir.
This is hours before he dies, right?
Yes, sir.
You look like that when you put him in the bathtub?
I'm sorry.
Gotta make me a moment. Yes. That's fine. Ms. Vander Ark, do we have a trash can? I did. I placed a trash can. Yes. All right. Would you like the beard removed? All right. Please rise.
She immediately began to dry heave and vomiting before the jury. Because of this, her attorney asked the judge to end the proceedings for the day. The next day, Shanda was not in the courtroom due to her medical issues. During the trial, the lieutenant showed the hot sauce they were giving to Timothy. It was called Elijah's Extreme Regret. This hot sauce consists of 2 of the world's hottest peppers, Trinidad Scorpion and Carolina Reaper. On the bottle of this hot sauce, it says, "The pain becomes unbearable, and you feel like you just ate a burning hot coal. That's when you realize extreme regret. Use with extreme caution or you will regret it." Shanda admitted to buying this hot sauce just to torture Timothy, but of course, she did say that her son Paul suggested it. After hearing how hot this hot sauce is, Shanda was discussing with Paul through text messages about putting this hot sauce on Timothy's genitals. She said, "I wonder how it would feel to have that hot sauce on your private parts. I'm not saying touch him there, not at all, but dripping a little bit there, is that horrible?" The prosecutor said that Timothy's death was the most disturbing case he has seen in his career. He said, "I've been at this job for over 20 years. The things that walk through this door on a day-in, day-out basis are horrific and traumatic, but I can safely say that within my career, this is probably one of the more sadistic and tragic events I've ever seen and witnessed and been a part of." Paul pleaded guilty to child abuse in December 2023 and is punishable by up to life in prison. Before Paul cooperated, he took a deal that if he testified truthfully, he would get no additional charges filed against him and he would be sentenced within the guidelines. So that means he doesn't have the same charges as his mother. His mother got charged with first-degree murder, and he is only charged with child abuse. Paul has not been sentenced yet.
Before 911 is called, was there some discussion about a hunger strike?
Yes.
What was the discussion about the hunger strike at that point?
Shanda said to say that he'd gone on a hunger strike. And that we found him on the bed.
Seems obvious, but who is she referring to?
Timothy.
And said that he was found on the bed?
Yes, the bed.
Okay, what are you seeing from him?
My heart breaks for him. My heart breaks for Paul. Listen, I have a son, my oldest son, who's 17. He has learning differences. He's slightly on the spectrum. And I'm not a psychologist or sociologist, so I can't diagnose him, but I feel as if he probably has some learning differences happening here. And my heart breaks for him. As I watch him, he's congruently telling the truth. When he lied to law enforcement, he goes, "Yes, I lied." He's looking down in shame. And here's the deal why I don't think it's a performance. It's because the gesture happens a half beat before the words. When I say to you, Vinny, call me, I don't say call me and then have the gesture. And when people are lying, there's that disconnect. The gesture happens after the words or right at the same time. This is a man here, a young man that I feel is trying to take responsibility and trying to make things right.
And as far as you're aware, that house is located within Muskegon County, correct?
Yes.
And at some point during that time period, did Shanda Vander Ark give you instructions that you were only supposed to feed Timothy bread with hot sauce or sometimes plain bread and no other food?
Yes.
And did Shanda Vander Ark either instruct or ask you to look after Timothy while she was at work?
Yes.
Was it or did you follow that instruction to feed him only bread with hot sauce or plain bread?
Yes.
And was it your understanding that Ms. Vander Ark was following the same food limitations for Timothy when you were at work and she was there?
Yes.
And was there a point approximately 3 weeks before Timothy's death that you realized that that very limited diet was having a serious effect on his health and weight?
Yes.
And did you communicate that to Ms. Vander Ark?
Yes.
And on that day, she allowed you to feed him an additional food?
Yes.
But after that, she went back to the instruction of only bread with hot sauce and bread?
Yes.
And did you follow that instruction?
Yes.
And your understanding was she was still similarly limiting his food intake when you were not present?
Yes.
The night before your brother Timothy died, did Shanda Vander Ark give you an instruction that you were to put him in the bathtub with water and ice?
Yes.
And did she give you further instructions about keeping him in the bathtub until she returned from work?
Yes.
And did you follow those instructions?
Yes.
I thought it'd be interesting just to add some clips in here talking about her body language, and also so you can have a better understanding on how she really feels about this entire situation.
One of the things I do want to comment on is her general appearance. The long braids over her shoulders, nothing wrong with that. I'm not being critical, but it's unusual. When you think of someone who's going to become an attorney, her appearance is a little bit different than you would expect. All right. Now, as we look at the body language, watch her eyebrows here. Now, I talk oftentimes about we raise our eyebrows when we want people to focus on our face. So oftentimes when you watch people's eyebrows, that lets you know what they think is important. So far she hasn't done it much, but she does right here. Watch this.
How did it happen that you ended up with custody then?
My ex reached out to me stating that Timothy he could no longer handle him.
All right. So the fact that her ex could, quote, no longer handle him, that's what she wants people to focus on. So she's, I believe, going to be focusing on how bad Timothy's behavior was.
Okay. There are leg irons discovered in your home. Were you aware of those?
I was aware that Paul had them.
All right. Right after she starts talking about the leg irons, he asked, were you aware of those? Watch her face right here.
Discovered in your home. Were you aware of those?
I was.
So oftentimes we close our eyes, one, when we think about things we don't like, and two, because we don't necessarily want to see the reaction of the person we're talking to. So as she's talking about this, she's closing her eyes briefly because this is going to be a hard thing to discuss.
Aware that Paul had them. You actually could look on my Amazon. Paul had the option to do payment on the Amazon as well as mine, and Paul had actually ordered those under his account.
Order the leg irons?
I did not, no.
Did you ever use them?
No, sir. No, I never instructed.
Let's be in specific. Did you ever use them with Timothy?
No, sir.
Okay.
And you saw a big swallow after that. Oftentimes we do that when we're feeling stressed or anxious.
No, I never instructed.
Let's be in specific. Did you ever use them with Timothy?
No, sir.
Okay. Once the police get there, do you tell them the truth?
No. I was so freaked out. I'm sorry. I'm sleep. I've got one. Sorry. Thank you.
You're welcome. Why didn't you tell them the truth? Why were you so freaked?
I don't remember what my line of thinking was at the time. I was so I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't.
Were you tired at that point?
I was exhausted. The night before he passed, I had less than an hour of sleep.
Were you frightened at that point?
Absolutely. I just lost my son.
All right.
Listen,
She's breaking up there because she lost her son.
Right. So right here, we saw the same exact behavior. We see this when people are asked a tough question. They're called start-stop sentences. They're a distraction that people do, like a magician saying, look over here so we can get off the question. So she distracts us with all this theatrics that's happening here. The big one, though, is the unveiling of the hidden expressions in her eyes. When we see white part above our eyes, the sclera, it's called, that top exposure, when we see white exposure, is surprise, an increase in alertness. And then what happens is we'll often see the white happen when we're confronted. Before someone attacks, Vinny, If you're in law enforcement and you were taking one of my classes, I would teach you to look for that because that person's about to attack when the white is showing at the top. But we also see it at the bottom with her. Now, bottom exposure often happens with being tired and fatigued. But here's the deal, you at home. When you see both, this is mentally disconnection. So we see both here, this mental disconnection happens. She is, in my expert opinion, training for over 20 years, law enforcement from all the three-lettered agencies. When we see this mental disconnection, when we see this dramatic performance she's making, it says there's more to the story here.
It took the jury a little more than an hour for them to find Shanda guilty. Shanda was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was also convicted of child abuse and was sentenced to 50 to 100 years in prison. This sentence exceeded the sentencing guidelines. The judge said he sentenced her above what the guidelines set out, stating, "The court finds that the amount of torture that I have indicated justifies a reasonable grounds to depart from the guidelines." He also said, "I think the guidelines, would take into consideration the amount of absolute, systematic, consistent torture that you engaged in here." Just want to let you guys know that Shanda does have a credit for 575 days served that will be taken into account for her incarceration time, but that doesn't really matter because she'll still be in there for life. The judge was really giving it to Shanda during her sentencing hearing. He also said, "I've been trying now for this entire case to wrap my mind around how somebody could do something so horrific, not only to another human being, but their own child. You intentionally and systematically tortured this child. Let's call it what it is. It's torture. You tortured this child. This wasn't punishment. You weren't trying to curb his behavior. You tortured him." The judge showed a picture of Timothy and he said, "I'm choosing to remember him like that. And you can't even look at him. That's how he was, a beautiful child with a lot of life in his eyes. That's who your son was, and you took that from him."
I didn't allow pictures to be shown in open court of Timothy as he was when he died because I didn't want people to remember him like that. But of all the things you took away from him, one thing I didn't want you to take away from him was at least some shred of dignity. So besides remembering him like that, I'm not going to let you hide in the darkness anymore. People know what you are now. They know what you did.
Shanda declined to speak during her hearing. In addition to her conviction, Shanda lost custody of G, and G said he wants nothing to do with her.
And I think we kind of both feel the same way about Shanda Vander Ark. What do you make of her taking the stand and claiming that she should have maintained parental rights to her young son?
It shows she has no remorse.
Yes.
This was not a death penalty case, but if it was, she certainly checked off all the boxes. She tortured him. She enlisted her other son to torture him as well. She was in a position of trust. He was vulnerable, and she had to know better. She was an attorney who passed the bar with honors in practicing. So she had no intellectual deficit where you could say she didn't know how to take care of a little boy. She knew what she was doing. And the nerve of that woman, if this was a death penalty case, she would have deserved the death penalty.
Yeah.
So now she has breath to be asking that she has parental rights over that surviving little boy. The nerve of her.
Yeah. Let me just say what that would have meant was that the child would have been, she would have had the ability to visit with her. She would have able to see him that way. It wouldn't have meant much more than that.
A couple of days after I finished recording this video, there was an update to the case. Paul was sentenced. Here's what happened during his sentencing hearing, and I'm curious to know if you guys agree with the judge.
These guidelines don't justify Mr. Ferguson's actions. Mr. Ferguson, I think you are a product of your environment, but I don't believe you that you're sorry. I don't. I don't think you have empathy. I don't think you have any emotion whatsoever. And that's what scares the court. It really scares me. I think you're sorry that you're here. I think you're sorry you got caught. I don't think you wanted Tim to die either, like your mother, because you would get caught and you wouldn't torture him anymore. And believe me, I've tried to sit here and try to think, well, maybe Mr. Ferguson's not as bad as Mom. I think you're just as bad, if not worse. If not worse. Because you had a job. You could have, Mr. Johnson actually asked you, couldn't you have brought home a thing of food for him? You could have gone to a neighbor and said, hey, my mom's abusing him. You could have grabbed him and got him out of there. You could have done any number of things to stop this. And you chose not to. Your own brother. This is where we're at. So, based on all that, it's a sentence of the court. You serve 30 years to 100 years, Michigan Department of Corrections. Credit for 592 days you've already served.
Whoa, the judge not mincing words there, telling Paul Ferguson he is one step away from becoming a psychopath, saying that he sees him as a danger to society. And when compared to his mother, the judge said, I see you as just as bad, if not worse, because Timothy was in his care. He was the one day to day caring for Timothy and could have flagged it for police, could have put a stop to it, could have done something, but he chose to do nothing and go along with his mother's bad behavior. Wow. The judge launching him 30 to 100 years. Oh boy. Oh boy, were you expecting this? That is a hefty sentence for a young man.
So that's the end of this case. What do you guys think about this? How do you feel about what happened and Paul's involvement? Do you think that he intentionally, I mean, he did intentionally do it, but do you think that if his mom didn't tell him to do it, he would do it anyway? I feel like he was desperate for his mother's love and he would do anything to please her. I feel like he did have mental issues, but I think he definitely knew right from wrong and he knew what he was doing was wrong. And Shanda, she's just a monster, clearly, and Timothy didn't deserve that. So tell me what you guys think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Bye, guys.